For those of you who are joining us by phone across the Prairie region, you have an important role to play in tonight's interactive telephone town hall. Host on tonight's call is PSAC Regional Executive Vice President Robyn Benson. We're also joined by two special guests from PSAC in Ottawa, Howie West, PSAC Work Reorganization Officer, and Allison Pillen, PSAC Workforce Adjustment Officer, who have joined this call to offer their WFA expertise and help answer your questions. If you have a question, just press 9 on your phone to let us know you'd like to ask your question live on this call. We're calling over 23,000 PSAC members in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta to have an important discussion about the workforce adjustment process and give you an opportunity to ask questions. However, due to the size of the call, we will only be able to address a small sample of the questions on this call. You will have a chance to leave a message at the end of this event, and we encourage you to ask any questions you still have. We'll update the PSAC Prairie Region website with responses to questions that we didn't have a chance to answer, and to some of those that were submitted in advance. Now let me introduce your Regional Executive Vice President, Robyn Benson. Robyn's been a UTE PSAC member for 31 years and has been the Regional Executive Vice President for the Prairie Region for 12 years. Remember, you can ask a question live on air by pressing 9 on your phone. Robyn?
Thanks very much, Jeffrey, and thank you all for joining tonight's call and spending part of your evening with us. It's a very trying time for all of our members who are facing WFA situations in their workplaces, and I want to ensure everyone gets the information they need to help them through the difficult decision-making process. This government has released a regressive federal budget that outlines severe cuts to departments and agency budgets. What's worse, they started rolling out the job cuts by the thousands before the budget has even passed. But despite this government secrecy and unwillingness to consult the people who provide services or the people who rely on them, they've not outsmarted us. We're working together with components to assist the membership and fight back against the destruction of quality public services in Canada. Our regional office staff are following up with locals and scheduling ongoing WFA training. Whatever your needs are during this time, we're ready to assist you.
Thanks, Robyn. That was PSAC Regional Executive Vice President Robyn Benson. We'll be going to your questions live on air in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, let's do a quick poll right now. We want to get a sense of who's on the call tonight and how many of you have been affected by the federal government cuts to public services so far. Please wait to hear all 5 options before you press a button, and you can only choose one. If you've received an affected letter, press 1. If you've received a surplus letter, press 2. If you haven't yet received a letter but are anticipating one in the coming weeks, press 3. And if you haven't received a letter, press 4. Thanks for taking that quick poll. Now I want to give our guest speakers an opportunity to talk. Howie West is the PSAC Work Reorganization Officer in Ottawa. He has worked with PSAC for 13 years, and his responsibilities include workforce adjustment, privatization and contracting out, and public policy analysis, to name a few. Allison Pillen is the PSAC Workforce Adjustment Officer and has worked for PSAC for nearly 4 years. Her roles include drafting materials and tools on WFA, responding to inquiries from members and regional reps, and delivering training on WFA. Before we begin taking questions from members, Howie and Allison are going to give us a brief overview of the WFA process and answer some of the basic inquiries that have been submitted in advance through the PSAC regional website. You can get in line to ask a question live on air by pressing 9 on your phone. Welcome, Howie and Allison, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, folks. This is Howie West speaking. Brothers and sisters, it's a sad day that we have to be here with you today. And some of us have been through it before in the mid-90s. Since then, we've been working to develop our Workforce Adjustment Appendix, which is an appendix to our core public service collective agreements and our key agency collective agreements. That's CRA, CFIA, and Parks. Each are a little bit different, but not so much that we can't describe an overview fairly generally. And that's what I'm going to do right now. And then Allison will speak for a few moments about how our website may be able to help you. The Workforce Adjustment Appendixes are fairly complicated documents. Those of you who have already looked at it in your collective agreements have probably already realized that already. So this overview is going to be just that, an overview. For more information, and we do encourage you to read the appendix and to talk to your regional offices for more intensive coursework. So the Workforce Adjustment Appendix, you need to think of it as a process. And it's a process with three basic parts. And during those parts, there are obligations that the employer has to maximize employment in the public service and to minimize involuntary departures. In that process, you have the first process, which is when people are affected. And in that case, people may or may not end up having their jobs taken away from them. The second part of the process is when people are surplused. During that part, you may receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, and certainly the employer has an obligation to extend a guarantee of a reasonable job offer to you if he can predict that there will be employment for the kind of work you do and the classification that you occupy and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the third part of the process is when you're in layoff status. So the first thing that happens when there's a workforce adjustment announced is that, at least from our perspective, the employer has to notify the union. This is usually done 2 days ahead of time. That gives the union and the components time to prepare to represent members when the employer tells the members that their jobs could be affected or surplus. Also, either before that time or during that time, components and departments should be and must, by the time a workforce adjustment is announced, start setting up workforce adjustment committees. And the Workforce Adjustment Committee is the most important mechanism that we have to ensure that the employer meets its obligations. We have grievances and complaints and those sort of things as well, but historically, a lot has been accomplished in workforce adjustment committees in a timely way that turns out to be extremely helpful to maximizing employment opportunities for PSAC members. I'm going to talk about what happens in the core public service, and of course in the agencies it's a little bit different, but let's, for the sake of argument, say it's very similar, at least in the parts that I'm going to talk about. So when you get an affected notice, two things could happen. You get an affected notice, and in that case, you may be affected for a certain length of time. You could be affected for a long time because there's no time limit on an affected notice. However, if your particular job is unique, or if your work location is going to be closed, and if the employer has determined that there is no more work in the public service that corresponds to the work that you are doing, you may get a surplus notice right from the start. So when you get the surplus notice, two things can happen. First, you can get a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Get a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, then the employer is guaranteeing that they will give you a job sometime in the future. They may or may not actually have that job for you at that particular point in time. But you have the guarantee, so you will be paid until the employer meets its commitment to give you a job. If you refuse a reasonable job offer, then your status goes immediately to layoff. Guhowever, if the employer has done his homework, and we demand that they do their homework, and has come to the conclusion that they can't give you a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, and the employer is obligated to look within the department, but also across the public service, then you will become opting. Now, when you become opting, that's a point when you have to make a decision. And you have 3, possibly 4 decisions to make. The first decision is you can become an opting employee with the possibility of being surplus for 12 months and being paid, and hoping that the Public Service Commission can find you a job in the meantime during those 12 months. The second decision that you may make as an opting employee is that you can resign with a transition measure. And if you're 55 years of age and have worked for 10 years, you may also be able to qualify for a pension waiver. The transition support measure is a lump sum payment that is the sum of your years of service times a formula that you will find in, usually it's Annex B of the workforce adjustment in your collective agreement. So it depends on the number of years you've worked. You look there, you look across the line, and you'll see how many weeks of pay you will get for your years of service. The third possibility, the third option, is called an education allowance. But in addition to the education allowance, you also get the transition support measure that I've just mentioned, plus up to, in most of our collective agreements, $10,000 if you want to go back to school, and if the education institution is registered, and if you provide receipts to the employer. You have 2 choices when you take the education allowance. You may either resign as soon as you receive the transition support measure, or you may go on leave without pay for 2 years, and this allows you to remain employed and receive your medical benefits and other benefits, except that not only do you pay your part of that, you also have to pay the employer's part of that. The fourth decision that you could make, and you can only make this decision if you are an opting employee and you have 120 days in which to make all of these decisions, is you could possibly alternate with an employee who has not been affected, who may want to leave the public service. And again, I said the public service, so that extends beyond your department. And during that time, that's called alternation. And what would happen is that if you're at the same salary range and classification, and the employee who wants to leave, if that manager realizes that you have the right essential qualifications and for the job that the employee who wants to depart has, then you can alternate into that position, while he would alternate into your opting position, get one of the either the transition support measure or the education allowance, and within 5 days depart from the public service. That's with the kinds of cuts that, for the most part, we're seeing now. Those are the main kinds of decisions that you will have to make. There's also a Part 7 to the workforce adjustment appendixes, with the exception of the transition policy at CFIA. And Part 7 is in the instances of an alternate delivery initiative. I'm not going to go into that today because I don't think it will be as common for most people, although we may indeed see it in a few unique situations. So that's a very, very quick overview. It doesn't do justice at all to the complexity of the document we have in front of us, but I think it gives you an idea of the kinds of protections that the union has been able to negotiate to help members through what is a bad process, and a bad situation because of this government's decision.
Great, thanks, Allison and Howie.